Okay, this is going to be your Halloween sentence review on complex sentences, DC, IC, IC, DC. So even though it says Tuesday bell ringer, today is Wednesday, so you're going to use this as your Wednesday bell ringer. Okay, so in IC, we know this from before, that this is an independent clause. It is a complete sentence. An IC has a subject and a verb, and it can stand alone. The verb begins the predicate. Okay? So now, for a complex sentence, we also need to talk about DCs. So a DC is a dependent clause, cannot stand alone. A DC also has a subject and a verb, but it cannot stand alone because it begins with a subordinating conjunction. So our pattern for complex sentences is DC, IC, period, or IC, DC, period. So if the dependent clause comes first, you have to have a comma separating the DC from the IC. If the independent clause comes first, no comma needed. So subordinating conjunctions, we also call these a white bus words or a woobus words. So just a few to remember after: as, although. The W, it should be WH together. Sorry. When, while, whenever. These are just some. When, while, whenever. I is if, in case. T is though. E can be even though. Can also be even if. B, before, because. U, until, unless. S, we'll write since. Okay? So all of these are subordinating conjunctions. So, in our box, we're going to write, be careful, only use a comma if the dependent clause comes first. Okay? So this means that the subordinating conjunction will be at the beginning of the sentence. It doesn't always have to be the first word. It may be the second word or the third word, but it's definitely at the beginning of the sentence. So now we're going to go to the next page, and you are going to need a green highlighter and a blue highlighter. And so what we're going to do is we're going to highlight our ICs green and our DC's blue and label them to determine if we need a comma. So here's what we're going to do. First, I'm going to see if I can find a subordinating conjunction. So I know that Mercy's mother and sister died 10 years before she did. My subordinating conjunction is before. So my independent clause is Mercy's mother and sister died 10 years. My dependent clause is before she did. So this is my IC, this is my DC. My pattern is IC, DC, period. I do not need a comma. Okay, after Mercy died, the townspeople encouraged George to try an alternative remedy. So my subordinating conjunction is after. So after Mercy died, and then I have a pause, because I'm going to begin a new sentence, the townspeople encouraged George to try an alternative remedy. So the townspeople encouraged George to try an alternative remedy. So here's my DC, here's my IC. Now I know from my patterns that if the DC comes first, I need a comma. So I need a comma to separate the DC from the IC. So pattern is DC, comma, IC, period. Okay, before his son convinced him, George wanted nothing to do with the ritual. So before is my subordinating conjunction. Before his son convinced him is my dependent clause. George wanted nothing to do with the ritual is my independent clause. So my DC comes first, so my comma goes between them, and the pattern is DC, comma, IC, period. Okay, even though Edwin drank his sister's ashes, he died anyway. So, even though is my subordinating conjunction. Even though Edwin drank his sister's ashes is my dependent clause. It needs some help. He died anyway is my independent clause. So my comma comes between my DC and my IC. So my pattern here is DC, comma, IC, period. George regretted his decision after it was too late. So my subordinating conjunction in this sentence is after. George regretted his decision is an independent clause. After it was too late is my dependent clause. So my pattern is IC, DC, period, and there is no comma needed. So now, after you finish this, you're going to complete the Google form. And then you're going to complete 5th grade QQ5 in IXL. And this is commas with compound and complex sentences.